Let's take a moment, my brothers and my sisters, and go before God in prayer. Heads are bowed, eyes are closed. Precious and wonderful God, come now in the form of your precious and Holy Spirit and share a word of hope. Share, dear God, a word of liberation. Share, dear God, a word of encouragement. But most importantly, dear God, share a word of motivation as we continue to preserve and to write Black history. These and all of the blessings we ask now in Jesus' precious and holy name. Amen. Come with me, if you will, to the book of Deuteronomy. In the 4th chapter, the 5th through the 9th verses. In the book of Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter, the 5th through the 9th verses. And I will be reading from the New Revised Standard Version of the Holy Bible. These are words of Moses as thus inspired by the Lord. See, just as the Lord my God has charged me, I now teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. You must observe them diligently, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call on him? And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as the entire law that I am setting before you? But take care and watch yourselves closely, so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. Word of God for the people of God. Let me take a moment and lift up, just beneath that sacred text, I want to lift up secular text that I think is appropriate for this occasion. This is from Dr. Carter G. Woodson, founder of the Journal of Negro History, in which he wrote an essay in 1926 titled Negro History Week. Dr. Woodson writes, if a race has no history, it has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated. The Hebrews, the text we just looked at in the Bible, the Hebrews keenly appreciated the value of tradition, as was attested by the Bible itself. In spite of worldwide persecution, therefore, the Negro is a great factor in our civilization. My brothers and my sisters, for just a few moments that is mine as we prepare to celebrate the sacrament of Holy Communion, I want to talk with you from the topic, know your history and share your history. Know your history and share your history. Now, last week, in watching the evening news, and probably in getting some news feeds on my phone, I received confirmation of a conclusion I reached many years ago. And it is simply this. If given the opportunity, Whoopi Goldberg will make a fool of herself. Back in 1993, Whoopi Goldberg defended the actions of her then love interest, the actor Ted Danson, after Mr. Danson thought it was funny to dress up in blackface as he was trying to roast Whoopi Goldberg while parading around and telling jokes. And looking at her as a black woman who would defend that sort of tasteless behavior, it became very obvious to me, she doesn't know her history. Now, regardless of whether you knew about her poor judgment back then, now we all should have recognized that she doesn't know her history based on more inappropriate comments just last week. Ms. Goldberg must have decided that since it's February, she was going to be woke. She wanted to be, I guess, pro-black, and she downplayed the significance of the Jewish Holocaust and the ethnic discrimination as suffered by so many of our Jewish brothers and sisters to this very day in these United States of America. Just like people have burned down black churches, they've burned down Jewish synagogues. And just 2 weeks ago, an armed gunman took hostages at Beth Israel Synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. Research statistics show that over recent years, especially under the previous presidential administration, an administration that began with a political campaign rooted in white supremacy and it ended with an insurrection that was bathed in white supremacy, America has had more hate crimes than any time in recent history. Hate crimes perpetrated against racial minorities like African Americans and ethnic minorities like Jewish Americans. Meaning, if the old saying is true that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, then Whoopi Goldberg should have realized that African Americans have found strength in the alliance with Jewish Americans because the story of their persecution and liberation going all the way back to enslavement in Egypt and freedom from Pharaoh has provided hope to a people who have had to endure chattel slavery, Jim Crow segregation, and the violence of lynch mobs, all while singing, "We shall overcome." What I'm suggesting to you this morning as we begin this celebration of Black History Month is that Whoopi Goldberg isn't alone. A whole bunch of folks don't know their history. She just has a microphone. Consequently, if folks don't know their history, they can't share their history. Now, with another movement underway, another movement that's targeted at school boards and local departments of education, a movement that is a conflation of Christian nationalists, white supremacists, and right-wing historians. This movement wants to revise educational curriculums to prevent young people from learning anything about black history that might make them feel uncomfortable. Newsflash, you can't talk about American history without talking about black history because black history is part of the freedom struggle of the United States of America. I'm suggesting, though, we shouldn't be surprised by the host Whoopi Goldberg because a whole lot of people are just like her. We have been warned by political attempts to use a wedge issue like critical race theory to take real history out of America's classrooms so future generations grow up in blissful ignorance. We've seen this type of warning before. We've seen it when folks have tried to negate the significance of the Holocaust and take Jewish books out of schools. And we see it when we look at Moses and his conversation with the children of Israel in this biblical text. When we look at the text, as we kick off this month-long celebration of Black history, we're preaching from the 4th chapter of Deuteronomy, a continuation of the Exodus story that is told to us by Moses before the children of Israel reached the promised land. Now, to talk about this 4th chapter of Deuteronomy in terms of a continuum of time, it occurs after the Israelites have crossed the Red Sea and been freed from enslavement in Egypt, but before they crossed the Jordan River into the promised land. Let's be clear. At this point in the story, God has been angry. When you read the first 3 chapters of Deuteronomy, God is very clear in terms of God's divine communication with Moses. God says, your people seem to have forgotten who I am, Moses. I am who I am, and I am the one that brought them from enslavement in Egypt. They want to talk badly about me? Guess what? I'll wait. So God decided to wait for 40 years, necessitating that a whole generation of doubters would just die out. And the children of Israel had to wander around for a mighty long time. Now, it's during that time in the wilderness that God spoke about the importance of people not only knowing their history, but of people also sharing their history. Meaning, long before Dr. Carter G. Woodson, God is telling us through the voice of Moses that no matter what you're going through, no matter who tries to discount you, no matter who tries to erase your existence from the face of the earth, hold on to your history because your history tells people who you really are. Last year, in the gubernatorial election in Virginia, we saw a forecast of the type of weather we're going to see in the fall 2022 midterm elections. Now watch this. I can't speak to the accuracy of a winter forecast with respect to old Punxsutawney Phil and whether he saw his shadow on Groundhog Day. But what I can speak to is this fact. The playbook is out. During the 2022 election cycle, there's a forecast for cold and rainy, hot and abrasive, and lies and alternative facts, as there's a concerted effort to erase anything we have known as Black history. But I do have good news in the midst of circumstance. The good news is that the same God who was a liberator back in Egypt is the same God who was an emancipator here in America. The same God who brought America through Jim Crow is the same God who gave us a black president back then and a black vice president right now. Oh, if I could connect these two situations in talking about the children of Israel back then and what's happening with Black America right now, it's that people will come and try to erase your history, but you can't let somebody erase you if you know it and you can share your history with somebody else. Know your history and share your history. Now, Black History Month is about a celebration. It's about knowing your history and sharing your history and celebrating the legacy of those who went before you. I want you to know that I love Black history and I love sharing Black history because I know for a fact I am Black history, so I'm proud of Black history. My late mother, my wonderful mother, a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta and a graduate of Dillard University, a sister HBCU, instilled in me a love for Black history and a respect for those who went before me. That's why, in the fall of 1989, when I set foot on the campus of Howard University, I came to realize that I am living Black history. Let me call a roll. As a freshman, I moved into Charles R. Drew Hall. I used to take history and political science classes in Frederick Douglass Hall. And because I was an econ major, most of my major classes were over in Elaine Locke Hall. Y'all don't hear me. For me, though, because history and political science were easy, I didn't have to spend excessive time over in Douglass Hall. I'm coming to the Omegas. I struggled. Can I tell you I struggled? Tell the truth and shame the devil. I struggled in science, so I spent a whole lot of time in Ernest Everett Just Hall. In my second year of college, as I moved off campus with a nod to my wife and all the lovely, we used to say, most gracious ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, my first apartment was in the 1900 block of 3rd Street, directly across the street from Lucy Diggs Slow Hall. And in order to get home, here's a nod to the wonderful ladies of Delta Sigma Theta. In order to get home, because there's no way my mother would have let her 18-year-old son have a car in Washington, D.C. In order to get home, every day I walk past the statute of fortitude. What I'm trying to say is that I love sharing Black history because I am Black history, and I'm proud to celebrate Black history too. This month then is about lifting up and celebrating ways that we as African Americans have shared our story time and time again. Now, I'm willing to bet if we call a church roll this morning, whether you went to college or regardless of if you went to college, in some way, shape, or form, you love sharing Black history too. Maybe you like sharing Black history as it's shared in acting when Sidney Poitier asked America the question, guess who's coming to dinner? Maybe you like sharing the story in song when Billie Holiday asked about all this strange fruit. Maybe you like sharing the story from literature with novelists like Ralph Ellison and Toni Morrison, who gave us classics like Invisible Man and The Bluest Eye. Black America has told that story in poetry with laureates like Gwendolyn Brooks, Maya Angelou, and now Amanda Gorman. Or if you like me and you came of age in the 80s, if you like me and my generation and you love rap music, you like telling the story through rap with folks like Run DMC too. You know I'm proud to be Black, y'all, and that's a fact, y'all. And if you try to take what's mine, I take it back, y'all. If you claim Billie Holiday, you gotta claim Run DMC too. Listen to these words from the 1980s. There was a man, an inventor, who invented so well. He invented a fortune for a man named Bell. George Washington Carver made the peanut great so that any man with a mind could create. You read about Malcolm X in the history text. Jesse Owens broke records. Ali broke necks. What's wrong with you, man? How could you be so dumb? Like Dr. King said, we shall overcome. Oh! The reason we celebrate black history and tell our story of how we were able to overcome, because if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. When we look back at the text in verse 9, God admonishes us through Moses by saying more than just, don't forget the things your eyes have seen. God goes on to say, make them known to your children and to your children's children. God was talking to Moses through this text, but in 1947, God was speaking through Richard R. Wright Sr., a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces who, before establishing a black-owned bank in Philadelphia and founding Savannah State University, the oldest public HBCU in the state of Georgia, he pushed for February 1st as National Freedom Day. February 1st was significant in the black freedom struggle because it was on February 1st, 1865, that President Abraham Lincoln signed the resolution that would later be ratified as the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America, abolishing slavery in the United States. God might have been speaking through Moses in this text, but in 1926, God was speaking through Carter G. Woodson, longtime dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Howard University, who obviously believed that one day just wasn't enough to lift up the celebration of black history. So Dr. Woodson pushed for a Negro History Week during the second week of February to honor the birthday of the emancipator Abraham Lincoln and the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Years later, in 1969, a year after the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and during the midst of a black power struggle, 7 years before anything was officially signed into law, God was speaking through students at Kent State University when they called out to have February designated as a month-long celebration of black history. In February the following year of 1970, that's the first time we ever celebrated such a thing. Now, however, did he say now? He said right now. Now, after we've graduated from National Freedom Day with God speaking through Richard Wright. Now, after we've graduated from Negro History Week with God speaking through Carter G. Woodson. Now, after continually telling the story of Black History Month with God speaking through college students in 1969, it appears that it's clear. With all of the foolishness going on here in 2022 around critical race theory, with a renewed fight for redistricting that will be going on in the North Carolina General Assembly, and with the U.S. Supreme Court poised to roll back affirmative action in higher education, this time God is speaking through me and God is speaking through you. This is where God is calling on us to speak out as people are trying to ban black history in classrooms without recognizing that black history is American history and you can't tell American history without talking about black history. We're the ones God is calling on to make sure there's black representation in Congress and proportionate representation in the North Carolina General Assembly instead of the illegal racial gerrymandering that's been going on for almost 20 years. We're the ones God is calling on to ensure that regardless of what becomes of affirmative action in college educations, our HBCUs will provide the finest education to the best and brightest and continue to turn obstacles into opportunities by opening doors for so many. We're the ones God is calling on because even as the American colonies were established in 1607, lawmakers and school board members don't want you to say the year 1619. They want you to sing a verse of Yankee Doodle Dandy and jump to July 4th, 1776. It's up to us, my brothers and sisters, to save black history. It's up to us to write our history and never let it be forgotten. I want to close now by making express what prayerfully has been made implied during the course of this preaching moment. Just like God spoke through Richard Wright, just like God spoke through Carter G. Woodson, just like God spoke through students at Kent State University, in just a few years, if things continue going as they are, we'll be talking about, remember when we used to celebrate black history? God is speaking through you. If you hear me as saying nothing else today, hear me as saying this. Know your history and share your history. Otherwise, to go back where we began and to paraphrase Dr. Carter G. Woodson, we will become irrelevant. God bless you. God keep you. Happy Black History Month.